Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the United States Naval Academy's Alumni Hall. I am Midshipman First Class John Rex Spivey, Class of 2013, Class President. This afternoon, we are recognizing 4 graduates of the Naval Academy who will receive the 2013 Distinguished Graduate Award Medal from the United States Naval Academy Alumni Association. We are honored to have with us 14 previous recipients of the Alumni Association's Distinguished Graduate Award. Joining us today are Captain John Crawford, United States Navy retired, Class of 1942. Admiral Sylvester Foley, United States Navy retired, Class of 1950. Admiral Carlisle A.H. Trost, United States Navy retired, Class of 1953. Rear Admiral Robert H. Shoemaker, United States Navy retired, Class of 1956. Admiral Bruce DeMars, United States Navy retired, Class of 1957. The Honorable Daniel Cooper, Class of 1957. Lieutenant General Matthew T. Cooper, United States Marine Corps retired, Class of 1958. Rear Admiral Benjamin Montoya, United States Navy retired, Class of 1958. Admiral Hank Childs, United States Navy retired, Class of 1960. Rear Admiral Thomas Lynch, United States Navy retired, Class of 1964. Admiral J. Paul Reason, United States Navy retired, Class of 1965. General Carlton Fulford, Jr., United States Marine Corps retired, Class of 1966. And Mr. Daniel Ackerson, Class of 1970. Ladies and gentlemen, please rise for the arrival of the official party, followed by the introduction of this year's Distinguished Graduate Award recipients. Please remain standing for the singing of our national anthem and the invocation given by the Naval Academy 5th Battalion Chaplain, Lieutenant Madison Carter. Ladies and gentlemen, the 61st Superintendent of the United States Naval Academy, Vice Admiral Michael H. Miller, Class of 1974. Admiral Robert J. Natter, United States Navy retired, Chairman, U.S. Naval Academy Alumni Association Board of Trustees, Class of 1967. Mr. Roger E. Tetrault, United States Naval Academy Class of 1963. The Honorable John Scott Redd, United States Naval Academy Class of 1966. Ambassador Richard L. Armitage, United States Naval Academy Class of 1967. Admiral Thomas B. Fargo, United States Navy retired, United States Naval Academy Class of 1970. Ladies and gentlemen, please remain standing. March on the colors. Ladies and gentlemen, our national anthem. Retire the colors. Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated.
As we begin this celebration of the actions and the deeds of these remarkable, distinguished guests, we take a few moments to remember those who have passed away. The history and tradition of the Naval Academy has been built on the contributions of men such as these. These distinguished graduates are truly part of the cornerstone in the legacy of the United States Naval Academy. Their lives will continue to inspire those who follow long after them. Let us honor those who have gone before with a moment of silence. Let us pray. Most gracious and loving Father, we pause for a second just to thank you. To thank you that you were bold enough to pour such amazing gifts into the lives of these magnificent men. We pray right now, Lord, that the words that will come forth from them will continue to inspire the next generation to carry on the same amazing legacy that you have prepared for us. We thank you, Father, for how they have gone through so many different challenges, faced so much adversity, but continue to be reminded of the core values that were instilled in them in these wonderful places and on this hallowed ground. We ask right now, Lord, that you continue to cover all of us, that you help us all to be inspired, help us all to be motivated, to remember a life of service, just as they have dedicated a life of service for these your people. It's in your gracious and holy name we do pray. Amen.
This is the 15th presentation ceremony for the awarding of the Distinguished Graduate Award by the United States Naval Academy and the United States Naval Academy Alumni Association. The Distinguished Graduate Award is presented to a living graduate of the United States Naval Academy whose character and distinguished service draw wholesome comparisons to the Naval Academy's core values of honor, courage, and commitment. These graduates have provided a lifetime of service to our nation and our naval service and have demonstrated unwavering support for the Naval Academy. This year, the Naval Academy Alumni Association has chosen to honor 4 individuals with this award. Ladies and gentlemen, Vice Admiral Michael H. Miller, the 61st Superintendent of the United States Naval Academy.
Thanks, Rex, and welcome to all of our special guests. It is a great day here at the United States Naval Academy. I'd especially like to welcome and honor our DGAs and their families, the Foundation and the Alumni Association, Admiral Natter. It is such a pleasure to have you here once again, and the generous support of so many people in this room. In addition to the brigade, I know we have some folks that are here for the first time seeing what the United States Naval Academy is about, and I would offer that what you will see is this long blue line and the significance of service, and it is what we are so proud and what sets this school apart. This is truly our 15th annual Academy Awards. Last year, I tried to convince you all that I was just a taller version of Billy Crystal. But knowing that that didn't pass, and of course it's for most of the people here, Seth MacFarlane is perhaps either a personal hero. I'm not going to do any giggities or that sort of stuff. But I would say that for the people we honor tonight, this afternoon I should say, the Bob Hope Performing Arts Center in which we are seated is, in point of fact, it recognizes the person who actually hosted the Academy Awards the most number of times. We actually had a big song and dance number here. We had Beyonce and Jay-Z and Simon and Garfunkel. We're going to do a reunion. Most of the brigade don't know who those are. And we're going to finish with a big boffo thing from the Rockettes. And then we had this fiscal crisis and the whole thing fell apart. But the good news is that we still have the Navy's oldest and finest band up here on my left, and the finest glee club in the United States. So we celebrate these 4 remarkable leaders of character today, leaders in not just in having worn the cloth of the nation, but in industry, in policy, diplomacy, technology, as well as military strategy. They heard and answered the call to service. It is what unites all of us in this room today. They've served at the highest levels of command and citizenship and government. Our midshipmen today honor their legacy by preparing to take the reins in their time. And there is every reason to believe that there is a future Chief of Naval Operations seated in here. And that Chief of Naval Operations will most likely serve in the year 2050. We talk a lot here about pressure and heat and the challenges of making it through one of the most demanding academic and physical and moral institutions in America. And I typically use a sword as that metaphor, but I would tell you pressure and heat produce many other unique products, one of which is glass. And the mirror that we see today, reflected in these remarkable gentlemen, is in fact the legacy that we all inherit by having made the one choice in our lives that changed everything, and that was to come to this school. I would tell you that we could not find a finer group to honor today. We celebrate your service. We celebrate the example that you have set for this unique institution. And as a superintendent, I want to personally thank you for your philanthropy and for your leadership in helping to guide this school on a trajectory that only gets better and brighter as we press on into the future. Thank you all very much.
We are pleased to showcase the lives and achievements of each of our distinguished graduates with a biographical video prepared in their honor. Presenting the Distinguished Graduate Award Medal to each of our awardees is the Brigade Commander, Midshipman Captain Jennifer Jones, class of 2013 of Alexandria, Virginia. She will be a nuclear surface warfare officer after graduation. She is assisted by Admiral Robert J. Natter, United States Navy retired. Accompanying Admiral Natter is Vice Admiral Michael H. Miller. From the United States Naval Academy class of 1963, Mr. Roger Tetrault.
Roger Tetrault was born to Bella and Hector in Hartford, Connecticut on September 3, 1941. He was the second born among 6 boys. His father was a machinist and his mother worked in a laundry service. During World War II, his father served in the Navy and survived a kamikaze attack on his ship at Okinawa. Roger's greatest hope for higher education was the United States Naval Academy, since he could not likely afford another college. At the Academy, he excelled academically and lettered 2 years in gymnastics. He also participated in a French foreign exchange cruise. The Lucky Bag noted, his ambition and drive earned Roger many friendships, which will remain lasting and rewarding. This is exemplified in his roommate, who was a close friend for over 50 years. After graduating in 1963, Roger was assigned to the USS Samuel B. Roberts in the Mediterranean and Indian Ocean. Although he earned his aviator wings in 1965, he continued serving in surface warfare on 2 Vietnam deployments aboard the USS Turner Joy. In 1970, Roger began Naval Reserve duty, serving in various billets including Commander's Submarine Force Atlantic Reserve Detachment. He retired in 1985 as a captain. During his naval service, Roger was awarded the Navy Commendation Medal with Combat V, the Navy Meritorious Unit Commendation, and the National Defense Service Medal, among other service awards. While in the reserves, Roger began work at the Babcock & Wilcox's Naval Nuclear Fuel Division, where he was in charge of a program to develop a new generation of nuclear reactors that would last the life of the ship. Later, as the Vice President and General Manager of the Naval Nuclear Fuel Division, the Navy selected the division to become its sole source supplier for nuclear reactors. During this period, he also attended more than 5 years of night classes at Lynchburg College, where he earned a master's degree in business administration. In 1988, Roger became Group Vice President of McDermott International, which is the parent company of Babcock & Wilcox. He was in charge of all government operations. In 1990, he was hired by General Dynamics as President of Electric Boat, the premier supplier of submarines. Roger was instrumental in keeping the company operational during an era of severe budgetary cutbacks. In 1993, Roger was named President of General Dynamics Land Systems, the primary maker of armored vehicles for the Army and Marine Corps. Like Electric Boat, the division was faced with severe cutbacks that would pose a critical impact on the company and the armed forces. Roger reorganized and restructured the division, which saved the military more than $700 million. For this, he was admitted to the Army's Order of St. George as a Distinguished Knight. He may be the first Naval Academy graduate to receive this honor. Roger returned to McDermott International in 1997 as CEO and Chairman of the Board, where he is credited with restructuring the company to eliminate debt, restore strong ethical behavior, and boost profitability. For his actions, he was named one of the nation's top CEOs by Hedrick and Struggles. Starting in the year 2000, Roger served on a number of space-related committees, including the NASA Advisory Council, International Space Station Task Force, Columbia Accident Investigation Board, and a committee to extend the life of the Hubble telescope. For his exemplary work, he received the NASA Distinguished Service Medal. He has supported his alma mater through generous donations and service. In 1998, he founded the Naval Academy Ethics Leadership Chair, which developed into what is now the Vice Admiral James B. Stockdale Center for Ethical Leadership. He was also a director on the Naval Academy Foundation Board. In addition to the Academy, he has supported the construction and operation of military museums across the country. Roger currently lives in Punta Gorda, Florida, with his wife, Dr. Linda Tetrault. He has 3 children and 2 grandchildren. Reflecting on his career, Roger says his greatest contribution was the development of a new generation of naval nuclear reactors built to last the lifetime of a ship, which saved the Navy billions of dollars on future procurements and overhauls. Mr. Roger E. Tetrault, an extraordinary leader dedicated to serving our nation.
I am a very lucky person. This is the telegram that told me that I would be admitted into the United States Naval Academy. This telegram happens to be dated May 28, 1959. It's not dated in January. It's not dated in February or March or April. It's dated in late May, only 5 short weeks before our induction. So it is very possible that I was the last person selected by the Academy for entry in 1959. I am a very lucky person. Obviously, this single event changed my entire life. Now, I've been told to specifically address my remarks to the brigade tonight, so let me start with a few things you midshipmen shouldn't do after you graduate. First, don't ever crash a plane off the bow of an aircraft carrier. Second, if you do, don't do it in January. And this is particularly true if you happen to be midway between Hawaii and Alaska, because I can assure you that the water is very cold. I am a very lucky person. I was lucky to walk away from that accident at the age of 25 and have been given many extra years since then. And now in my later years, I know that I'm lucky to be alive and eligible to receive this honor, which, as recently was said, is only given to living alumni. And with the pacemaker, a metal hip, and more than a touch of emphysema, I am very cognizant of the fact that over 150 of my deserving classmates are no longer eligible for this award. And it is a particular honor, and also a bit lucky, for me to be able to receive this award in the year 2013, since it is exactly 50 years after my own graduation. Of the 55 distinguished graduates that have previously been selected, only one other has been awarded on the anniversary of their 50th graduation. As a part of the Link in the Chain program, my class, the class of 1963, has been paired for the last 4 years with this year's great graduating class of 2013. And during that period, we have attended many events with 13, and there's more to come, including graduation in just a few short weeks. Now, you midshipmen wearing a class of 13 ring have melted within your ring the gold from 11 of my classmates and plus a miniature. Now, my class did in fact start another, what appears to be a new tradition this year. A number of my classmates have been donating their swords to members of the class of 13. There have been a number of ceremonies around the country where these swords have been turned over to this new generation of warriors for our nation. And I will tell you that if there is a member of 13 that would like my sword, I'd be very proud to pass it on. The class of 63 is a proud class, with members having won 3 Navy Crosses, an Army Cross, and there are 28 of my classmates that are named in Memorial Hall as having died in the line of duty. 13 of those died in combat in Vietnam, and we also had 2 long-term prisoners of war from Vietnam. And of course, there is much more that could be said about the class of 63. However, I can tell you that it's nice for us to know that whether it's in a ring or a sword, a piece of us in my generation will live on in this great blue chain, knowing that we've done our duty as best we could, just as we know the class of 13 will do theirs. Now, the title of this award is Distinguished Graduate, and it is in my mind just a bit of a misnomer, since virtually all Academy graduates do in fact go on to have distinguished careers of their own. And in an earlier film clip, it showed a photo of my friend, and he was not only my high school friend, but my junior high school friend, Ted Willant, and we were in our leather sweaters. And Ted's parents drove us from Huntington, New York, to Annapolis for our induction. Prior to that drive, I'd never been south or west of New Jersey. Ted and I roomed together all 4 years at the Academy, and he was an All-American lacrosse player, and he helped Navy win 3 national championships during that time. He went on to make the Navy his career, and during that career, he commanded 3 Navy ships. Unfortunately, my friend Ted passed away a few years ago, and he can't personally be here with us tonight, but his widow, Lorraine, who I've also known since high school, is with us tonight. And Ted is certainly here in more than just spirit, because somewhere out there's a seat with his name on it. One of you midshipmen is probably sitting in Ted's seat. But the point of this story is that this isn't a great academy because it produces a few high achievers that are lucky like me to win this award. It's great because it year after year produces 1,000 great individuals that go on to have their own distinguished careers, just as Ted did. Now, I've thought a lot about the 5 minutes that I've been allotted to somehow recap over 70 years of living with both its successes and its failures, and a lifetime of both happiness and sorrows, and quite frankly, I'm just not smart enough to distill an entire life into 5 minutes. But if I've had any success in my professional career, it's probably due to just 2 things. I took big professional risks by taking on very difficult tasks. And the second item is that I had the perseverance to see those tasks through to success. And you should never underestimate the need for perseverance, because you will surely get knocked down many times during your life. And it is really important to remember that the only person that can really keep you down is you. Now, I really believe that the key to life is to be able to end it believing that you were able to achieve something of value while having laughed loudly, smiled broadly, and loved deeply. And my wish for all of you is that you will accomplish all of this during your life and be lucky like me.
From the United States Naval Academy Class of 1966, the Honorable John Scott Redd.
John Scott Redd was born to Mary and John in Sidney, Iowa on September 10, 1944. Having several family members that served in World War II, Scott had a strong interest in a military career. At the Naval Academy, Scott was a scholar and a leader. He commanded the Drum and Bugle Corps and graduated second in his class with a dual major in mathematics and physics. The lucky bag noted his drive to do a job just a little bit better than the next fellow. Scotty and the Navy have many fine and mutually rewarding years ahead of them, an accurate prediction of Scott's career. After graduation in 1966, he studied for a year as a Fulbright scholar in Uruguay and went to sea serving in destroyers and frigates. In 1981, he took command of USS King, the first of 5 command tours at sea. Under his command, King won the Battle E and the Marjorie Sterrett Battleship Fund Award as the top cruiser-destroyer in the Atlantic Fleet. After proving his proficiency in command of Destroyer Squadron 36, Scott was selected for flag rank in 1987, the first in his class. His first flag assignment was Commander Standing Naval Force Atlantic, the first American flag officer to hold that position. In March of 1991, Rear Admiral Redd was assigned as commander of Cruiser Destroyer Group 12 and the Eisenhower Battle Group, the first carrier battle group to deploy to the Middle East after Operation Desert Storm. After earning his third star, Scott returned to sea as Commander, U.S. Naval Forces Central Command, where he proposed, commissioned, and commanded 5th Fleet, the Navy's first and newest fleet since World War II. Ashore, Scott served in several high-profile policy assignments in the Pentagon. In his final assignment as Director of Strategic Plans and Policy for the Joint Staff, Scott represented the military in National Security Council meetings and was responsible for development of the new National Military Strategy for the 21st century. During his distinguished career, Scott was awarded 3 Defense Distinguished Service Medals, 2 Navy Distinguished Service Medals, and the National Intelligence Distinguished Service Medal, among other awards. After retirement in 1998, Scott became Chairman, CEO, and President of NetSchools Corporation, a company on the leading edge of education technology. In February of 2004, he went to Baghdad as Deputy Administrator and Chief Operating Officer of the Coalition Provisional Authority governing Iraq. In May, he returned to Washington to serve as Executive Director of the Presidential Commission on Weapons of Mass Destruction. The Commission's report in 2005 became the President's blueprint for reforming the U.S. intelligence community. In June 2005, President George W. Bush selected Scott to serve as the first Senate-confirmed director of the National Counterterrorism Center. In that job, he was responsible for writing the nation's first war plan for the global war on terror. As one of his last official acts in office, President Bush presented Scott with the Presidential National Security Medal, only the 83rd award in its 60-year history. Scott has selflessly volunteered his time to several nonprofit organizations, serving on governing boards for the Officers Christian Fellowship, Military Ministry, and the Reformed Theological Seminary. In support of the Academy, he has served as president of his class, Alumni Association trustee, Distinguished Graduate Award Selection Committee member from 2009 to 2011, and a Forrestal lecturer. Scott and his wife Donna currently reside in McLean, Virginia. They have 3 married children and 9 grandchildren. Looking back on his career, Scott describes his most meaningful accomplishment as starting up and leading 2 organizations that remain central to U.S. national security, the Navy's 5th Fleet and the National Counterterrorism Center. The Honorable John Scott Redd, a leader at the highest levels of command, citizenship, and government, whose exceptional character distinguishes him among many.
Thank you. Admiral Natter, Admiral Miller, Congressman Whitman, Secretary Jackson, I think I see Secretary O'Keefe over there, other distinguished guests, Brigade of Midshipmen. Let me also add my welcome and sincere thanks for your honoring us with your presence today. It's a high privilege and honor for me to represent the class of 1966 today. I'll say more about that in just a minute. If you're wondering what emotions this event brings out, let me give you my own personal reactions. Awe, humility, and gratitude. My wife would add a 4th emotion, astonishment. Several reasons for that. First, when you look through the list of previous awardees, you can't help but be impressed. Some of them are here today, and many of them have been my personal heroes over the career time. Second, this award is one in which you're nominated by your classmates. A group who knows you, knows all your foibles, all your weaknesses, and yet still puts your name forward to represent them. And that in itself is an incredibly great honor. But what makes this award and this ceremony different and special is that it causes you to look back over your life, and indeed the history of your class. You remember all those people who supported you, who nurtured you, those who you work for and you learn from, and later on, those you had the privilege to lead and hopefully nurture in return. But it also brings back other memories. Memories of those who hauled down their flag all too soon. The roommate who didn't return from a training flight. The company mate who didn't come back from Vietnam. The six-striper classmate who was cut down by cancer as a commander. All of those thoughts lead to gratitude, deep gratitude. So please indulge me in a few thank yous. First of all, I'm deeply grateful to God for the opportunity to serve Him and to serve those who protect our country. It's a long, long way from that small farming community of 1,000 people in Iowa to the bridge of an aircraft carrier in the Arabian Gulf, let alone the Oval Office. I could never have imagined that trip in my wildest dreams. Second, I am deeply grateful to the person who's been with me through it all. My wife, Donna, is a Navy junior. She understood what the Navy life is all about, and she married me on one condition, that I would get out of the Navy. Thankfully, she was a school teacher and not a contract lawyer, and 30 years later, I kept my word and retired. We've been blessed with 3 wonderful children who survived life as Navy juniors, married well, are thriving, and have given us 9 grandchildren. If we'd known how much fun grandchildren are, I think we'd have probably had more children. I remain wildly in love with my child bride. Thank you, sweetheart. In the story of my life, you've been the happy ending for 44 years. Please stand up. Finally, I'd like to thank my classmates from the great class of 1966. Let me tell you a little bit about them, and in a broader sense about all of the classes which are represented here on the stage today. We all grew up and served most of our careers under the dark skies of the Cold War. We drove the ships and submarines that hunted for Red October. We flew the planes that shadowed the Soviet fleet. When the Cold War turned hot, as it did in Vietnam, we were there, in the air, on the ground, on the seas, and on the rivers. We were there when the Cold War ended, and the New World Order turned surprisingly disorderly with the first Gulf War. Some of us continued to fight on in the current war, the global war on terror. Our class motto is Non sibi sed patriae, not for self, but for country. That's a high bar, but I think we've lived up to it. And I'd like to ask my classmates from the class of 66 to stand up and be recognized. Thank you. Now, in the spirit of full disclosure, however, I do have to say that there's still a bit of an open discussion among my classmates as to whether our success is as a result of or in spite of our firsties. Now, if you've done the math, you'll realize that our first class were the class of 63. So, Roger, I'll let you know how that discussion comes out. Okay, now a little more seriously for the midshipmen here. What's the point? What's all that mean to you as you look to the future? Let me suggest 3 things that you should remember. 3 things that will be as true for you and your generation as they were for my generation and the generations which have come before. The 3 things are this. First, your calling. Second, your job. And third, your primary qualification. First, your calling. As long as you wear the uniform of the United States military, you will have one primary mission. That mission is simply this: to be prepared to fight and win the nation's wars. Let me say that again. Your mission is to be prepared to fight and win the nation's wars. Your calling is to be a warrior. In spite of the best efforts of the diplomats and the politicians, one thing is a virtual certainty: you will go to war. When and where you go to war may be expected, or it may be a surprise. 50 years ago, when the class of 1966 entered the Naval Academy, most of us had never heard of the country called Vietnam. A dozen years later, we had lost more classmates killed in action than any other Naval Academy class. So that's your calling. Each of you is called to be a warrior. Learn your warfare specialty and learn it well. Remember, there's no prize for second place in combat. The second thing to remember is your task, your primary job. As an officer of the Naval Service, you'll do lots of things. Some of you will fly airplanes. Some of you will drive ships and submarines or tanks or do ground warfare. But first and foremost, your primary job will be to be a leader. So spend a lot of time thinking about that, learning to be a leader. Look at the good ones, see what they do right. Think about your personal leadership philosophy and be able to articulate it. And finally, I would say this to you. I would offer you this. All of you midshipmen have the ability and the potential to lead at the highest level. You wouldn't be here if you didn't. But I would submit to you that the most important qualification that you bring to leadership and to command is character. Someone has defined character as what you do when no one's looking, or what you do when only God is looking. But however you define it, character is always measured by this yardstick. Do the right thing, do the right thing in the right way, do the right thing in the right way for the right reason. And I would submit to you that at the top of the list of right reasons, at the top of that list is service. If you are a good leader, you will serve and be a servant to those that you lead. I can guarantee you, if you remember those three things, and if you practice them, and 50 years from now, when the class of 2066 is looking to the end of their plebe year, you will be able to say, I was a graduate of the United States Naval Academy. I was a warrior. I was a leader. I was a man or woman of character and integrity. I kept the faith with those generations that went before me. Thank you. God bless you all, and may God bless the United States of America.
From the United States Naval Academy Class of 1967, Ambassador Richard L. Armitage.
Richard Armitage was born to Leo and Ruth in Boston, Massachusetts on April 26, 1945. While in high school, the Naval Academy Athletic Association recognized his athletic talent and recruited him. Rich accepted because no other scholarship offer was more appealing. Known by his classmates as the Mule, Rich played football as a lineman and linebacker. The Lucky Bag noted his fine reputation both as a player and a coach. The entire athletic department is familiar with the never say die record that is accorded him. After graduating in 1967, Rich began his Navy service as an ensign aboard a destroyer deployed to Vietnam. He subsequently volunteered for 3 naval advisor tours, spending much time on riverboats behind enemy lines. During his Navy career, Rich Armitage received numerous U.S. military decorations, including the Bronze Star with Combat V, the Navy Commendation Medal with Combat V, and the Navy Achievement Medal with Combat V, as well as Vietnamese jump wings. After departing the Navy, he joined the United States Defense Attaché Office in Saigon. In 1975, just prior to the fall of Saigon, Rich organized and led the removal of South Vietnamese naval assets and personnel out of the country away from the approaching North Vietnamese Army. Initially, 36 Vietnamese ships were to be destroyed, but when he found them loaded with over 30,000 South Vietnamese, he personally escorted the flotilla to Subic Bay in the Philippines. Upon arrival, he negotiated with the U.S. and Philippine governments to allow the ships to dock safely. He then arranged for the delivery of food, water, and medical supplies for the refugees. He continued to run the humanitarian pipeline to Guam, then stateside. Credited with saving their lives, these refugees became U.S. citizens, and many of their children have since graduated from the Naval Academy. After returning stateside, Rich continued working for the Department of Defense, but was quickly sent to Tehran, Iran, to serve as a consultant. In 1977, he became an administrative assistant to Senator Bob Dole of Kansas. He then became a foreign policy advisor to President-elect Ronald Reagan in 1980. Following that role, he served as Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for East Asia and Pacific Affairs. 2 years later, he was promoted to Assistant Secretary of Defense for International Security Policy, where he represented the Department of Defense in developing political-military relationships and initiatives throughout the world. In addition, he helped spearhead the U.S. Pacific security policy. For his management of all defense security programs, he received the Department of State Distinguished Service Award, 4 Department of Defense medals for distinguished public service, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs Award for outstanding public service, and the Presidential Citizens Medal. In 2001, Rich was confirmed by Congress as the 13th Deputy Secretary of State, serving under Secretary Colin Powell. He is chairman of the Board of Directors of the American-Turkish Council, a business association dedicated to strengthening U.S.-Turkish relations. Rich has contributed significantly to the Naval Academy as a 2-time member of the Board of Visitors and as chairman of the Honor Review Committee. He also served on the Alumni Association Distinguished Graduate Award Selection Committee from 2006 to 2008 and as a lecturer every semester from 2010 to 2012. Rich and his wife Laura have 8 children and currently live in Arlington, Virginia. Reflecting on his life, Rich personally considers the family he and his wife Laura raised as the most meaningful accomplishment. Professionally, his most meaningful accomplishment was his role in diffusing the possibility of war between Pakistan and India in 2002. Ambassador Richard L. Armitage, an accomplished leader and hero to many for both the United States and foreign nations.
Well, good afternoon. Admiral Miller, Mrs. Miller, thank you very much for your hosting of this event, but moreover for your energetic, enthusiastic leadership of this academy. For the selection committee, I sure thank you, but I sure hope you guys knew what you were doing. Really try not to embarrass you along the way. But particularly to Admiral Tom Lynch, I want to say thank you. Tom, you sent a very kind and thoughtful letter to me, which meant a heck of a lot to me. My classmate and good friend Bob Natter, who called me with this astonishing news, I thank you, and moreover my classmate Dave Church, who's the reason that this award has gone through. I want to also acknowledge particularly my classmates, the class of '67. You'll know who they are very easily. They are the people walking around slack-jawed in astonishment at this selection. But no more slack-jawed than I was when I heard it. But I particularly want to note 2 of our classmates who are not here, Ray and Kathy Smith, who were coming and had a family problem which delayed them on the West Coast, and a classmate of ours who has shown more courage, more grit, more fortitude and fighting illness after illness than any man or woman I've ever seen, and that's Billy Calhoun. So let him be in our thoughts and our prayers. I want to thank my workmates who've come here to show support. This is a heck of a place to play hooky at, but I appreciate you being here. The ballers, the B-ballers from Saturday morning, I thank you for being here. I know what you're thinking. You play basketball? Well, it's not recognizable as basketball. But it's, I'm a guy who's carrying the weight for a fellow who's 6'8". And when I get my growth spurt, I really want to be ready. But most importantly, I want to thank my family here assembled, those who could come, and my wife, Laura. I appreciate so much you being here. You know, I don't know that I have any particular cogent advice to give to the brigade. Some of you, for 4 years, have been getting advice. You're probably advised up to here. And I'll just make a few observations, if I may. I was, as my classmates will tell you, a really undistinguished midshipman. You'd find me sitting up on that top row up there, I can guarantee you, where I could get plenty of rest. And I wandered through this yard with a combination cap in which was inscribed IHTFP. My then fiancée, later and still wife, Laura, and I would walk through the yards, and we'd see graduates coming back with their children and sometimes their grandchildren, and we'd say to each other, gosh, we didn't lose anything here. There's no need for us to come back from the Naval Academy. And you know, for 10 years almost, we didn't. But then we finally discovered and came to the understanding that while you're here, this may be sometimes a difficult place to be at. It sure is a wonderful place to be from. And slowly over time, we started coming back and getting more and more involved in the Naval Academy. I suggest that may happen to you. You know, we think we don't change. We think the way we are now is the way we're always going to be. Well, if you midshipmen look to the right, look to your right, and you're going to see people you would identify as lifers. And guess what? Some of them are. Some of them will be generals and admirals. But some of these so-called lifers will be out in 5 or 6 years. And you look to your left and you'll see people that are going to be 5 and drive, you're sure. They're gone. And you know what? Some of them will be gone in 5 years. And some will be generals and admirals. Because as you go along a road, you invariably come to a fork. And when you come to a fork in the road, you take it. There's not a correct fork or an incorrect fork, a right or a wrong fork. There's just a fork. And as you travel that road and you take these forks, I would suggest 3 observations for you which have meant something to me. And the first is, in this road of life, nothing is ever as good or as bad as it seems at the time. It's very important to keep balance and equilibrium in your life. And the second is, no matter what problems are on your shoulders, no matter what weighty decisions are on your shoulders and awaiting your decision, things always look better in the morning. There's something so rejuvenating about a morning, a little rest, and things look a little better. The last observation I have is one which I freely admit I often fail at observing. And that is that as you travel that road and take those forks, everyone you meet along the road should be treated with a little bit more kindness than you think they deserve at the time, because you don't know what's going on in their minds and in their lives. And if they abuse it, that's on them. But you'll be a much better person for it. So, to you firsties who are about to hit the fleet, fair winds and following seas. To you second class who are about to assume the leadership, the reins of leadership of the brigade, good luck, congratulations. To you youngsters, well, I got news for you. You're about to lose your anonymity. And to you plebes, I've got great news for you. You're about to gain your anonymity. Thank you all very much.
From the United States Naval Academy Class of 1970, Admiral Thomas B. Fargo.
Thomas Fargo was born June 13, 1948, to Helen and Thomas in San Diego, California. His father, Commander Thomas Bolton, was a 1943 Naval Academy graduate and served on the USS Colorado in World War II. At the time, his mother was a Navy nurse who served in the Pacific. His father, who became a naval aviator, died in a carrier aviation accident in 1957, and Tom was raised by his stepfather, Captain William B. Fargo, a 1939 graduate of the Naval Academy. His parents' admiration of their service encouraged Tom to pursue a career in the Navy and follow their footsteps to the Naval Academy. At the Academy, Tom was Midshipman Platoon Commander and made the Dean's List for 4 semesters. He played golf for 2 years, which has remained a focus for life. The Lucky Bag noted, "His good humor and hard work will take him far, and the Navy will never be the same." After graduating in 1970, Tom joined the submarine force. His abilities as a submarine officer earned him command of the USS Salt Lake City. Tom's achievements would inevitably lead him to highly demanding command assignments, as Commander Submarine Group 7, Commander Task Force 74, and as Commander Task Force 157. As Commander, 5th Fleet and Commander Naval Forces Central Command, Admiral Fargo led joint strikes into Iraq during contingency operations from July 1996 to July 1998. As the Deputy Chief of Naval Operations for Plans, Policy, and Operations, Tom was influential in our nation's commitment to the Asia-Pacific and Middle East regions. Tom successfully updated the fleet's joint force integration as Commander-in-Chief, U.S. Pacific Fleet. His final assignment was Commander, United States Pacific Command, where he was responsible for developing a sustained force posture change and leading the tsunami relief effort in Southeast Asia. Among many awards earned during his distinguished career, Tom was awarded the Defense Distinguished Service Medal, 5 Navy Distinguished Service Medals, a Defense Superior Service Medal, and 3 Legions of Merit. He was also Officer of the Order of Australia, and in 1989, a recipient of the Vice Admiral James Bond Stockdale Award for Inspirational Leadership. After retirement in February 2005, Tom became a remarkable leader in industry. His business sense has been influential in the boardrooms of Northrop Grumman, Huntington Ingalls, Hawaiian Electric, Hawaiian Airlines, and USAA. Tom supports many philanthropic causes in Hawaii and the Pacific, and is generous with his time and resources. This includes his position on Iolani School Board of Governors and the Board of Directors for the Friends of Hawaii Charities, and as the National Vice Chair of the Pearl Harbor Memorial Fund, which provided $52 million for rebuilding the USS Arizona Memorial Museum and Visitor Center. Tom contributes significant time to his alma mater as a guest speaker and supportive midshipman visits to Hawaii and the Pacific. He has recently joined the Naval Academy Foundation Board as a director and has been a President's Circle donor since 2004. Tom and his wife Sarah are parents of 2 children and currently live in Honolulu, Hawaii. Looking back on his career, Tom says his most meaningful accomplishment was training, developing, and motivating young officers and enlisted personnel to reach their full potential and continue to make a contribution to their country either in the Navy or out. Admiral Thomas Bolton Fargo, a distinguished naval officer who personifies the Academy's mission. His selfless and inspiring leadership bring honor to the institution and to the Navy.
Well, thank you and good afternoon. And I don't know about all of you, but I want another 5 more minutes of Rich Armitage. How about that? Admiral Natter, Admiral Miller, fellow recipients, distinguished guests, family and friends, classmates, and especially the Brigade of Midshipmen who we addressed this afternoon. My classmate Dan Ackerson, who was honored here last year, sent me a note saying that this will be a very special day in your life, and he couldn't have been more correct. Sarah and I are honored, humbled, and certainly very grateful. It is special to be nominated by one's classmates, and I'd like to thank John Nathman and Charlie Young, who initiated this whole process, and of course, Admiral Joe Preer and his committee. Let me say a few words about my classmates, the great class of 1970 right over here. They're seated across the way. They always make a lot of noise. Classmates are an important part of your life. They certainly are right now, and they certainly will be, maybe even more so, in the years ahead. They know you well. I'm confident that there are some of mine who are thinking at this very moment that clearly there must be a statute of limitations on just how far back the Distinguished Graduate Committee can review a potential recipient's record. Certainly those early days as a midshipman and a junior officer, we worked hard, incredibly hard, but we enjoyed equally our time at sea and ashore while forging friendships for a lifetime. Jim Wood, my roommate the first 2 years, is here from Arkansas. We went different paths through life, like many of you will, but always felt the need and the desire to stay in touch. I'm sure one of Jim's memories, one of his first memories, was the day, youngster year, when I got my teeth knocked out back there in our very own field house during a pickup basketball game. Jim was a very good basketball player, and I was a very short basketball player. We were playing the plebe basketball coach and a buddy of his who was just huge and had played professionally. The anatomy lesson that day was when you set a pick on someone who's 6'9", his elbow is at exactly the same height as your mouth. So with my two front teeth literally in hand, I headed to the Bancroft Hall Dental Clinic, where a young lieutenant who happened to have the duty that night after just graduating from dental school wired them back in. You know, at that point in time, I thought that lieutenants were the source of all wisdom. 20 years later, when reunited with that same officer at another Navy dental clinic, he remarked that he was just amazed that those teeth stayed in. As the video indicated, we grew up in a Navy family. My father was a naval aviator, was lost too early in life. My stepfather, a surface warfare officer. My mother, a Navy nurse in the Pacific. My brother, a supply officer, and my brother-in-law, a submariner. So we've got almost all the bases covered. If you have a complaint about any aspect of the Navy, we may very well be responsible. We moved a lot, and I believe we were stronger for it. My brother Keith, my sister Barbara, my brother-in-law Charlie, and their families are here today, and each has had an equally distinguished career, and let me thank them for their support. I believe it was Admiral Snuffy Smith who 6 years ago at this ceremony provided the advice to the brigade that when you're looking for a lifelong partner, marry up. Now, I assume by that he meant someone that's better looking, somebody that's wiser, and also someone who's a flawless judge of character, which will be important with the multitude of people you will encounter over your career. You will find that throughout your career and throughout your life, the best counsel you get, especially in the most difficult situations, is from your spouse. So thank you, Sarah. Thank you for 30 years. I came to the Naval Academy for the first time at a young age. In fact, I'm a graduate of the first grade at the Naval Academy Primary School, which at the time was right above the pro shop at the Naval Academy Golf Course. From those early memories as we grew up with the Navy, it was clear to me that my parents had a life that they hugely enjoyed. It was exciting, certainly rewarding, and they were serving their country with a set of friends and shipmates they valued tremendously. So my decision was an easy one. My own experience was equally exhilarating. 35 years, I climbed Mount Fuji, walked the Great Wall of China, scaled Machu Picchu in Peru, toured the pyramids, and enjoyed the beaches of Ipanema and Copacabana. The person who penned the phrase, join the Navy and see the world, had it just right. But of course, those were only sidelights. Nothing has compared to the opportunity to lead a cross-section of our nation's citizens from those early days as a division officer on board Gennard through the various commands in Asia and the Pacific and the Middle East. Or taking a billion-dollar submarine and 130 souls and sailing into the most demanding days of the Cold War. You know, it's funny how our naval service works. You start out in your first assignment as a division officer or a platoon commander. You work hard to learn your job and gain operational competence. And when you look at the person that you're working for, in my case, it was the engineer, you probably feel that he or she has the most difficult job on the planet. But at some point along the way, while you're intently focused on your current responsibilities, you have this revelation that you could handle that next assignment. In fact, you recognize that you could do it pretty well. That doesn't mean there isn't some trepidation. If there isn't, you may not understand the stakes. But that progression is as true in moving from a division officer to a department head as it is from the strike group to a fleet commander. And in reflection, I believe that Admiral Ken McKee, former superintendent, had it right when he convinced me 30 years ago that the three most respected components of leadership were competence, integrity, and endurance. Well, endurance may sound a little strange, but you have to be able to make good judgments when you're tired. It's kind of like making that foul shot after running the court for 38 minutes. Through it all, I've had the great good fortune to work for a number of magnificent leaders, really too many to name. Some were visionary, some courageous, others compassionate, and a few were really tough. But each felt a responsibility to develop me personally and professionally and to ensure that I had every opportunity for success. They taught me that good people will make honest mistakes, and certainly I did a lot to fortify that premise, since over a career I made maybe the Navy or the submarine forces only 63 bell landing. The good news that Skate's port propeller was only slightly damaged. I tried to pump the entire Atlantic Ocean into the forward trim tank of a submarine. By the way, it does not fit and you will lose depth control. But like depth control, it's how you recover and deal with the problem that's especially important. And after all, at the end of that tour, I was the Squadron Ship Handler of the Year. Along the way, I've been blessed with a legion of great people working for me. Many are here today, and I'm deeply appreciative of their talent, their energy, their patience, their timely recommendations, and loyalty. We shared a number of what I called heart beating through the chest moments, and together we managed to get to the right outcome, which really brings me to this equally great opportunity that you have before you. In my experience in both the military and the private sectors, there is no place in our society where you will graduate from college and assume greater responsibility or exercise more immediate leadership. Whether you stay in our military for a career or move down a different path like many of our distinguished graduates, you'll find yourself tremendously well served, not only by your time here, but each experience in the immediate years ahead. Of course, with opportunity comes obligation. Your solemn obligation is to train and develop and impart what you have learned to each sailor or Marine placed in your charge. It may also mean later in your career trying to sleep, maybe with one eye or one ear open, so to speak, as you allow a newly qualified officer of the deck to stand the watch in the dark of night. A very wise naval officer, Admiral Bob Long, class of 1944, who in many ways raised me in the Navy, told me on my way to my first command, "Tom, your legacy as a leader will be the future contributions of your people to this nation and how well your ship performs after you leave." It was good advice, and he was precisely right. Thank you all very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, please join in another round of applause for our new distinguished graduates. Please join the Naval Academy Glee Club in singing the Navy Blue and Gold.